This is my new camera that I got.
We're live, Mr. Mayor.
We're live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. Nice to see that we have people joining us on YouTube, streaming live this session of council. And welcome to our councilors old and new to this, their third meeting. And I will begin by offering our deep thanks to the Mi'kmaq people. We are gathered today in their traditional land, and we are grateful for that. You have an agenda that was emailed to you. Are there any additions or errors or omissions to that agenda?
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the agenda as proposed.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Now, all in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. Let's go to the regular meeting minutes of November 26th. What is your wish?
I move that they be accepted as circulated.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Burdick. Councillor Wilson? You're on mute, sir.
Can I just make a correction to those minutes before we pass? It says in them that I was to be a real live member of the police commission. And in fact, I think we agreed at our meeting that I'd be an alternate.
Okay. So we will note that to the minutes. Councillor Carver, are you comfortable with that adjustment? Okay, Councillor Burdick, you seconded. You're happy with it? Okay. Motion to accept the minutes as amended. All in favor? Motion's carried. There are no delegations or individuals or presentations tonight. So let's go to correspondence. We have for action a letter from Peter Julian, the MP for New Westminster Burnaby, and Jenny Kwan, MP for Vancouver East, and Don Dexter, who is from Vancouver Kingsway, concerning Bill 213. CAO or Deputy CAO, were you going to speak to that?
The only thing I would do is just to preface this to say that we do receive these kind of requests from time to time. I think councillors from the last term would remember Canada Post getting a lot of letters to councils back and forth on both sides of that issue. So I don't have advice in this respect. I don't know whether council's standard practice has been to weigh in on these things, but certainly they do come through from time to time.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I think the letter is worthy of individual, perusal. But as regarding council, I would move that we receive and file the letter.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, you seconding? Okay, moved and second that we receive and file. I'm sorry, Councillor Carver.
Oh, no, I just want to ask a question or make a comment.
Yes, please.
Before we vote. I'm just hoping for some clarification around the reason we wouldn't support this kind of request.
Councillor Feeney.
I believe in my reading that they're looking for individual signatures on petitions. And, certainly any councillor could feel free to participate and sign if they feel that's appropriate. But relating to council motion and or petition, I think we should just receive it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. I haven't picked up that it was individual signatures, but if it were a request for council to support the issue, do we have any reason why we wouldn't? I'm just trying to understand that.
Anyone? CAO? this really is a little different than the Canada Post the type of the survey or the support that they were seeking. This is three federal MPs looking for support for a bill that ostensibly will mediate the impact of changing prices of pharmacy products on our in particular on our senior citizens.
I've certainly got no reason to discourage council from taking action. I was simply saying that it's council's prerogative to take action on these or not, depending on whether somebody makes a motion.
Okay, well,
So
we do
we-
have a motion on the floor,
Yeah,
moved and seconded to receive and file.
okay. But just to be sure, we don't have a policy on this in the same way we have a policy on proclamations.
Yeah,
don't
no,
believe we
there's
do,
nothing in a
Deputy
policy
Clerk.
that would speak to this.
Okay. Thank you.
We don't have a policy on this, Deputy Clerk, at all? Okay, good. You've heard the motion, duly seconded, all in favor? Motion is carried, it will be received and filed. Let's go next to the correspondence for information items. All three are from NSFM, 2 Monday memos and 1 special update. I think the special update is worthy of some note. It contains the infamous CAP map and CAP has been hardly endorsed by the elimination of the CAP by NSFM and a number of the political members in the province. There was an all-party presentation back in January or February that we participated in, one of the many towns that were there, talking about how CAP impacted on our town. And the suggestion now is that we, quote, give wide distribution to that CAP map. And in discussion with the CAO, it was suggested that a bit of work around a communications piece go with it. So someone at home just doesn't all of a sudden get this map with the dots all over it, but they get a bit of a backgrounder to what the CAP is, how it was generated, why it has seemingly outlived its usefulness, and why there is a move to eliminate it, albeit over a lengthy period of time. Councillor Carver?
Yes, I circulated an email saying that I was tempted to post it myself on my councillor page and decided not to because I realized I wasn't going to be able to field questions adequately. And I hoped that it could be posted on the town website where adequate information could be posted. So I'd like to make a motion to that effect, if I may, that the CAP map be posted on the town website with along with background and explanatory information.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Feeney, notably a member of PVSC, where all this stuff comes from in the first place. CAO Hyde, do you have a comment?
Oh, I think it's just with respect to that same point about addressing questions. Throughout COVID-19, for example, we've received a lot of different releases, and our habit has been not to interpret, but just simply to redirect. So in this case, NSFM has provided some points, some talking points, and some contact information. I would strongly suggest that we just repost that information. I do have a concern that our interpreting this, even well-intended, is just going to serve to bring questions about why we would remove the CAP when in fact the town will not be the one making the decision on whether the CAP is removed. It would affect every municipality.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Motion's been made and seconded that we will share the NSFM information and CAP map with our, put it on our Facebook or on our website. All in favor? That
I had
motion
a
is carried.
question.
Yes, sir?
So, mine was to say, I thought Dylan was saying a slight amendment to the motion so that it's not with town information, but with the information that's been forwarded from NSFM, so that the town is not sort of giving explanation, but what has been provided by NSFM.
I think.
Is that what we're agreeing to?
Share just the NSFM information. But the question I think that's going to come up is anyone in town hall going to attempt to address the questions? Or do we refer them to NSFM?
I was going to reframe the motion, but Mayor, when you recited the motion again, you did say UNSM information.
Did I say
So
UNSM? UNSM is NSFM, right?
I'm NSFM, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm stuck in the past. The NSFM information, so it fit for me.
Yeah, but that's what I understood the CAO to say.
yeah.
We were just going to forward that.
I was lax in not correcting the wording. But
Okay.
people who ask questions can always be referred to their to phone PVSC and to clarify their personal situations.
Well, it's, yeah. So PVSC would certainly advocate for the elimination of the cap and the abhorrent distortion of tax rates it's driven. But PVSC doesn't drive tax policy. So that's something that's squarely with the provincial government. I think from a public policy perspective, it's clear that the cap has had significant unintended consequences. And, you know, they're very compelling arguments that there are far more losers than there are winners from the cap. And if, you know, with a new council coming, coming together, I think there are several pieces of collateral material that might help everyone get up to speed on the core issues. But I think it's crystal clear, especially when you have a huge turnover of real estate, like we're experiencing Mahone Bay, that we're going to have tremendous distortion in the market now between assessed rates versus cap rates. So, you know, this is a topic I really feel pretty passionate about. Well intended back in the day when it was established, but you know, the time for the government to finally get around to fixing this problem is now. Hope springs eternal that it'll happen.
And it's not a short-term turnover either. At the all parties meeting, they were talking about a 13-year timeline to eliminate it. So any one property is not going to see this huge or big impact and have the cap disappear in a year or two. It's over quite a period of time. Councillor Carver?
Yes, I just want to clarify what I said, that people could, if they had questions, could call PVSC. I meant it only about their personal accounts. For example, when I looked at the map, I could see that even though I'm capped, I'm paying more than I need to be paying. And so I'm not going to call the CAO of the town with that question. I'm going to call my PVSC number on my assessment paper.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So correspondence information items. What is your wish? We need to do something with it. Councillor Wilson? Receive and file. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now, motions to receive and file. All in favor? Motion's carried. Maintenant la prochaine, let's go to staff reports. Number 6, CAO.
Lots of staff reports on this one. Most of them are pretty specific with recommendations, but the first one is the report to council. Just to note, the only section that is updated on the first meeting of the month is the section for tasks assigned by council.
And are you going to share screen so we can see your?
if there are any questions on tasks assigned or other parts that were updated at the last meeting, I'll certainly share.
Councillor Wilson. You can't hear you, sir.
You hear me now?
There you go.
No, I'm sorry. That stupid thing doesn't work. I was noticing as I went through the report that there was a fair amount of stuff in there that was exactly the same word for word as last meeting. And I'm wondering if there's a way that when something has been dealt with and its history, that it can be excised, because what I know what happens to me is when I'm going through stuff like that and I've read it all before, I start to skim, and I'm invariably skim something important.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to help with that. That's part of this being a new reporting structure for the new council members. So the only part of this report that's updated on the first meeting of each month is the very first part. So it's out of the whole 41 pages, I think it's the first 5 pages or so. It's just those items listed as tasks assigned by council. And then the whole rest of the document is just in there. We could not put it on, but I think almost every single meeting we have had where it hasn't been updated, there's been a question that's come up with respect to the parts that were on the previous meeting agenda. So I think the additional time does give people a chance to take a look. Plus, members of the public looking at the package may not have looked at the previous meeting package. So that's the thought, but I'm always looking for suggestions to make it more clear.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
Yeah, I have a question, not about the first section, but about the second section.
Well,
if I
thanks for
may.
proving my point, Penny.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I know. And it's because my brain picks things up at different times. So this one is just a question about number 6, the Alternative Energy Resource Authority. And I'm just interested to know if we have any information yet about how the heat pump program is panning out. It says that there have been 32 assessments completed. How does that fit with our expectations on that? Did we have it?
Yeah, I think there'll be an end of season report. It's a good opportunity to ask that question. So this went on to council's agenda, as we were noting last updated second meeting in November. And so there was only the end of October update. But we do have an end of November update, and as it's turned out, for better or worse, the end of November is the end of the program. For the fall, the door-to-door would be wrapping up anyway, and with COVID numbers having come up, it was wrapped up in the final week of November. So we'll have a report on the whole engagement. My recollection from what I've just in discussion with Catherine and Lenta is that we had, between this program and our data collection, we visited every home. Through the data collection, initially, we were able to kind of short list a number of homes where there would be an interest or the technology would be appropriate. So we went back to those ones first, and I think most of this 35 were those. And then subsequently, Catherine either spoke with, or in most cases, just left information for people. And I know there were a couple of occasions when people, because she left my cards for some folks as well, had contacted me, and we followed up, and they were booked for assessment. So I know there were more than 35, and I know that there was good reach in the community, but there will be a report, I'm sure, in January to kind of summarize the whole program to date. And then we're picking up again in the spring.
Yeah, oh, good, thank you.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, on item 16, as you all know, the deputy mayor's motion at our last meeting was unanimously supported to move along with our, unsubsidized or 100% funded by the taxpayer improvement at the 3-way stop. And I'm hoping that we can bring that to the attention under the theme of, how council can, influence the other areas of government with our local MLA and MP, because I think it's a good illustration, although it's a small amount of money in the relative sense of how, our expectations for the cadence of applications has led to some significant disappointment over the last 2 calendar years. And I think this is an excellent example where at some point the towns really have to go it alone and do and move along if we're unable to secure our partners' financial support. And I'm wondering if what the rest of council's thoughts are around using this as an analogy in a letter, maybe in the new year to the MLA, to let them know that, sometimes we just can't wait in an issue like this one, which was safety, as the deputy mayor articulated at the last meeting. We can't just wait forever to move
Mhm.
things along.
Okay. Councillor Carver?
Yeah, I would certainly support that. Asking for, making the issue known to our provincial and federal government representatives, and to give them examples. I certainly support that idea.
Councillor Burdick?
I support it too. I think it's a really good example of how things can happen when the intent is there. As a conversation I had with Maureen, there sometimes guilt works in small doses too. Who knows,
Mm-hmm. A CAO?
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think if we talk about giving examples, and there are plenty of great examples that we can give, one of the things about the design of Clearway in Maine as a project was that this was essentially the quicker, easier way to do the intersection. If people recall, Bicycle Nova Scotia had
Mhm.
given some original recommendations around raised intersection design and some bicycle safety infrastructure. And the issue there is that because we're doing some very good asset management work, we know that the lines underlying that intersection, stormwater, wastewater, and water, are some of the worst in the community. And so for the last 2 years, council has said our top priority is to do that line replacement work. Well, we can't go ahead and make significant surface improvements to the intersection. So even the project that we're doing in a way that isn't what would be the best way to do it, because we know that the thing we're really waiting on is the multi-million-dollar water wastewater work.
Mhm.
So, it's a great example because there are so many levels to which we're trying to plan ahead. We're aware of the condition of the infrastructure. We're aware of the best practice for the community, but we can't do any of it
So
unilaterally.
here's the reality for us. Councillor Feeney, do you want to make that a motion? That staff prepare a letter to go to the MLA and our MP for my
Well-
signature to cite these examples?
I mean, maybe with a second thought, maybe we're better off, as our normal practice, to inviting the MLA and the MP to council at their convenience sometime early in the new year. And at that point, we'll be able to share with them our priorities around the council table.
Mhm.
That's generally been more effective and maybe a less of a burden than having staff write many, many tersely worded letters. So, I think we can send the message, and maybe it would be better set, face to face in the normal course of business in January, February. Mayor, what's council thought about an invitation to the MLA and the MP
As
to meet
opposed
with
to
us and talk about our priorities in the new year?
Councillor Carver?
I think that either way is excellent. I was just thinking that usually those meetings come at the invitation or suggestion of the MLA or the MP. But what's to stop us from issuing the invitation and highlighting the essence of our concern, which is why we're issuing the invitation.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I fully agree with the issuing the invitation as an approach. Sounds like something, I guess, on a personal level would be very appealing to me. What I would suggest is that as we get closer to when this will happen, that we have not more than 3 priorities that we're talking about, and not bombard them with a whole list that it becomes very difficult for them to prioritize. If we can have one, it would be great, but I think we might have more than one. But as a group, be very, I guess, succinct about the particular ask we're asking for, and have the numbers pretty handy, so that at least from my perspective, it can be more forceful. We're doing that.
Okay. CAO?
So just kind of following up on that from the deputy mayor, I don't know how you make sure it's on your agenda, but you may want to time this into February, early February around the strategic plan development, because that way council can actually have your top priorities that you as a group have had a chance to consider. So I don't know how you get it on that agenda other than just somebody remembering it, but that'd be my suggestion.
Okay. Councillor Burdick, did you have another comment?
I think that's maybe a nicer way of doing it for sure. Maybe a little bit less confrontational. And it's a way also to get the community involved too. They might be interested in knowing that there are these different levels of government talking about the issue happening in our own town.
Okay. All right. So we're going to look at extending an invitation to our MLA and our MP, not at the same time, to come and speak with council. Councillor Carver?
Just picking up on Councillor Burdick's theme there about public interest, and the tradition has been that these meetings with the MLA and the MP are private when they have issued the invitation. So if we had to issue the invitation, maybe it wouldn't have to be. I don't know.
We have done that in the past, and they requested that the meeting would not be open to the public. However, that's not to say we can't, and I think we should keep the public informed, as I think Councillor Burdick is suggesting, with what's going on in our discussions with other levels of government. Open to the public if they have no issue with that, but
so I guess given that we have two, sitting cabinet members at both levels of government, their time is valuable. I think if a request goes out in the next, week or so, that there'd be some expectation that sometime, in the new year, in the first couple months of the new year, that, those kinds of meetings may be possible.
okay.
We can always be disappointed, but
If you don't like disappointment, you shouldn't be on council. CAO?
Just since it has been raised, before Mo and I have to go back and forth a bunch to clarify, the MLA and MP haven't changed. They have expressed that they will speak with council in a private conversation. So if you're going to invite them to anything other than that, I think you're going to have to be quite explicit.
Agreed. No, we'll put the offer out and they can define the parameters. And we'll embrace it no matter what they are. Deputy Mayor, are you going to offer a comment or?
No, I just agree with what you said.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anything else on the CAO's report? Councillor Feeney, are you finished with that item or? Okay. Anyone? Thank you, CAO. Let's go on to
Deputy Mayor has his hand.
Oh, Deputy Mayor.
No, that's okay. I was late bringing it up. I was just curious about the plan to get staff back to the town hall. I know it's been mentioned that the work has gone on. I was wondering what the possibilities of having at least one staff at the town hall, if it's on a rotation basis, but at least to have the town hall open rather than shut it down indefinitely would be great. But I'm not so sure what the intricacies of that would be.
Yeah, I can certainly speak to it. So right now we're midway through. I really thought we'd be done. Work to put in barriers and plexiglass in the downstairs area. There's been a delay on the materials for the barriers. Plexiglass is in. So that work will be completed over the holidays or by the first week of January is the ETA we've got now. And so I'm happy to come back to that first meeting in January and maybe give a more up-to-date plan. The rest of the building renovations should by that point be started, but they are all to the upper floors with the exception of 2 changes to the doorways on the first floor. So I think in January we'll have a much better sense, but I think the downstairs office could be at a place to safely operate pretty quickly into the new year. So we can certainly revisit that. That would be my expectation right now. And as for the second and third floors, council chambers and the restoration of staff spaces on the third floor, that will be planned to be finished up by late, March, April. So.
Councillor Burdick.
A question about that. Are there sort of safety concerns or regulations about somebody working on their own? Just a single person in the building, or is that not an issue?
Well, there's a number of different ways to answer that. So I think you must mean somebody being at the front desk, because we have people in the rest of the building.
I do mean somebody at the front desk. Yeah.
So the main thing with the front desk is that, as the office is configured right now, with the door to the building locked and to be able to control public access, there's only one way in or out of the front of the building. So it's through that front door. So if somebody is to be allowed into the building, the staff person in the main office has to notice that somebody's out there, go out there, get them, escort them into the building without getting within 6 feet of them, of course, and having to wear the mask, then get back behind their barrier, serve them, and then go back out with them in order to let the next person in. So there's a few changes. The addition of a doorway on the other end of the finance space would allow for a flow of people where they come in the front door and they go out the side door. So that would be much more improved. And then we intend to have a way to open the front door, like when you go to the Irving after hours with the buzzer. So those 2 changes, along with the plexiglass and the barriers, are significant. But the bigger thing has not to do with the individual, but to do with the public access. So, for example, the barriers are terms of cleaning requirements and access requirements from the province. If we don't have control of public access to areas of the building, then we have a lot more sensitivity and requirements in those areas with respect to the staff who do work in them. So when the building's in normal operation, most of the councillors will recall, people are pretty free to walk up and down the stairs, in and out from the garage, suddenly find them in your office, no matter what you're up to. You really can't control access within the town office typically. So unfortunately, and we love that vibe, I think a lot of the time, it's nice, it's welcoming. The downstairs office is going to have a barrier across the stairway that separates people's access to that part of the building. And so essentially, the only public parts of the building will be required to be cleaned to a different standard. And, really what this is all about from the staff safety perspective is protecting the works staff who still require use of the second and third floors. And many of them are, very scarce professionals. We have a couple of certified staff for each of our utilities, and they don't work in the same spaces with each other. They use separate vehicles to avoid cross-contamination. And we don't, as the rest of the staff, go into their workspaces unnecessarily, and we certainly don't allow public access to those spaces. So a lot of our procedures have been about keeping the work staff safe while they go about the rest of their work. So, I mean, those are all factors to consider. I know it's a long answer, but at the end of the day, what we want to be able to do is have a good, safe flow of people through the downstairs office. And if we can't provide that, and we are providing quite a good, I think, alternative service, we certainly haven't had any complaints about, then we just want to focus on the service standard, rather than the perception of, and hopefully we'll get to that service standard in the downstairs office again soon.
Okay. Anything else, anyone? All right. Deputy Mayor?
All good. I appreciate the explanation. I guess that's what's missing from a few lines on the report.
Okay.
Very helpful to know the background. Thanks.
Let's go to 6.2 then. the staff report on council and committee policy review.
All right, I'll just preface that this appeared on your agenda the last meeting, the 2nd November meeting. And as with all policies, it was to put on the agenda for any possible direction today. Council did have a special meeting earlier today, which was also on our YouTube. If anybody's watching and didn't see it, you can go find it there. And that was to again discuss the possible amendment of the council and committee's policies. So here we are again, just as part of a regular review. Any additional amendment to council and committee policies, and for the council members, just to say where we left off the discussion earlier, there was still some, I believe, interest in covering council meeting times and specifically committee appointments with respect to any committees that council does not want to appoint public members for this year.
Okay, thank you. And I would add to that, CAO, that when we had that discussion today at noontime, Councillor Carver had inquired about the committees which were understood to be being left or planned to be left from the list. And we had the Municipal Electric Utilities of Nova Scotia, the MEUNS, the Highway 103 Committee, and the Physician Recruitment Committee. And the fourth one was the Economic Development Committee, and whether or not that particular item could be deferred for a period of time or eliminated completely. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd move that the committee policy be amended to reflect the suspension of the Economic Development Committee until the terms of that committee are updated.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick seconds. Moved and seconded to forestall. What was the verb you used, Joseph?
Reflect the suspension of the Economic Development Committee until the terms of the committee are updated.
Suspension, that's the magic word. So it's not disappearing, it's just being put on the siding until we get some things cleared up with it. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Other issues coming up on 6.2. Councillor Carver.
Thank you. I want to propose that we retain the current meeting schedule of Tuesday and Thursday as a core basic schedule for at least the next 6 months, and to see how it is working for everybody, the new configuration of council members. I want to add something else, but I think it would have to be a separate motion.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Carver? Councillor Now moved and seconded that we continue with the Tuesday, Thursday on the question. Deputy Mayor?
Just curious, Councillor Carver, does that change the conversation we had this morning? And there was a motion I think you were already going to do that. I might be a bit confused about that, because we had talked about the possibility of a third option for not a committee piece there. I can't remember how we talked about it. Does that change that particular conversation?
That was the other thing that I decided I wouldn't put into this motion, but just to keep the basic Tuesday, Thursday meeting pattern. And then the other things like committee of the whole and bylaw committee we'll come to later.
Okay. CAO, you have a comment?
Yeah, 2 comments now. The first one was going to be that the motion isn't in order because there's a motion to just do what we're already doing. So there's no need to have this motion on the table. And then sorry, And with respect to the deputy mayor's point, yeah, the council has earlier today directed staff by motion to come back with proposed terms of reference for an all council committee. So that regardless of the council meeting structure, the timing of that committee's meetings is to be determined.
Okay, so council, we don't need a motion to keep doing what we've been doing because we've been doing it so well. And the committee of the whole piece, staff have already been given direction on that, and they will report back to council at a future date concerning terms of reference for an all committee of the whole. Councillor Burdick.
Just to clarify, is this specifically just about the days of the week, or is it also about the time of the meetings that we're talking about retaining the same schedule? Because I brought up earlier just the possibility of considering a slightly earlier start time, but depending on whether or not that would work for everybody else's schedules, obviously. But say
Well,
like,
notwithstanding the council, it also has to work for the citizens who may choose to participate. And a 6 o'clock start may just be that much more difficult for some folks who get off work by the time they come home and have their dinner. They wouldn't be ready for a 6 o'clock start. I don't know. What do the rest of the council think? CAO, you had your hand up?
Yeah, well, again, I added up, I guess, for two things. One was just to say we did already again today direct staff to consider the terms of a 15-minute period prior to the council meeting for public participation. So that would push the start time of the meeting earlier to begin with, which effectively 6:30 then for council and staff. And then the second thing I was going to say is with respect to that and the staff, so council and the public are certainly top considerations, but the evening meetings are always difficult for staff. There are three of us who do support these meetings generally, at least while we're online, probably even when we go back to being in person. And we would, I guess, always ask that the timing of meetings be either in or contiguous to the workday or separated from the workday by at least 90 minutes so that we can realistically leave. Otherwise, we are essentially just bound to work right through till after the meeting. So 6:30 is kind of the earliest time, unless we're going to go for an early meeting like at 4:30 or 5.
Thank you. Councillor Carver was next.
And I simply wanted to say that I deliberately did not include a time of meeting time. I specifically was kept by motion to the days and didn't include.
Thank you. And as the CAO indicated, we're now at a 6:30 start time anyway, if we think about the potential to add that piece for the public. Councillor Burdick.
well, that makes a lot of sense, particularly for the staff. I was also thinking in terms of for the public. I think probably with the last meeting in mind, which went almost to 10 o'clock, I was thinking that there are not going to be a lot of people who would find that super easy to do that late. But I really think it's important that staff has the time to separate those periods for you, unless it were actually earlier in the day. But then that might add additional burdens right there. And also other people have day jobs that are specific sort of.
That 10 o'clock end time was unusual. It's not the first time it's happened, but it is unusual for the meetings to go that long. Normally they're only 2.5 hours and we're done.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
So I have a question about the idea of a bylaw at Policy and Bylaw Committee, which we've brought up before, and whether the kind of issue that a Bylaw and Policy Committee would address would be the same kind of issue that would come up in a committee of the whole. I just want to be sure that idea doesn't get lost, because we got to it because we didn't want to spend too much time in a regular council meeting when decisions had to be made we didn't want to spend too much time focusing on punctuation and wording and things like that. So the
Okay,
staff will be sure that the bylaw and policies issue gets folded into the recommendation that comes.
CAO?
Yeah, I would strongly agree. I definitely would see that as the vehicle for those discussions, and I think it's the best place to start.
Okay. Councillor Now.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, aside from those issues, the other committees that require townspeople from the public on them. And I think that we should probably get on that to get the requests in for townspeople to put their applications in for those committees so that we can get started. And then it'd be up to those committees that they could set their own times for when they were going to meet.
CAO?
I like the sound of that. I was wondering if council would agree to doing a last call for anyone who would like to make any proposed changes to the committee's policy with respect to the terms of reference, so that we could know that we were in a position to move ahead based on the one change that we've already made this meeting. And the clerk may have something to add.
I do, actually. I just want to point out that we do certainly have committees that come together, and then when they're all together, they say we need to find a different time. But it is good to have the time that they meet so that people know this is, say, a Monday evening meeting. I'm not available Monday evening, so I wouldn't put my name forward for that. To appoint members of the public to a committee, and then maybe have some of them say, well, I'm not available Wednesday afternoons. And, you know, much like we did with the session when we were talking about appointing counselors to committees, we said, this is when this one meets. What does that work? So certainly we do have committees that come together, and then once they're all together, they discuss a time that would be better for them. But I would say it is very helpful for recruitment to have at least a suggested time.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy CEO. I love the ending was suggested time, because I would love for folks to have that opportunity to I guess haggle and agree on a good time, because I know I've done that with the age-friendly committee, and they were very welcoming when I suggested that we meet at 7. The other piece was with regards to committees, terms of reference. One thing that I noticed, and maybe it has nothing to do with the terms of reference, but the committees that I've sat on, basically what happened was when the agenda was being formed, and particularly maybe it's the PSC, and maybe that's the way it's been, that there would be discussion. I think it's between staff and the chair, and if there was nothing that was considered to be on the agenda, then the members of the committee are told, well, we have nothing on the agenda. We will not have a meeting this time round. And what the I guess structure I was used to, maybe that's what a council structure is. If you're on a committee, there will be that, just like council, that reminder, you can send in your agenda items at around this time. Is it 10 days before the meeting day? Please send in your agenda items. If none comes, then things can move on. Because I think there's sometimes that maybe from the chair and council, there might not be agendas, but the public has some agendas that they might want to throw in when there's no agenda. So for instance, around the PSC, when there was an issue of Airbnb, there was pressure to make a decision, and some deliberation had been done, but the pressure sort of, from my perspective, leads to there being, I guess, a rushed decision-making process, as opposed to, can we deliberate what we want to, as a community, think through Airbnb, so that when the MPS is getting changed, like we're changing it now, at least the folks at that table have some good ideas that they can put forward, or things like that. Age-friendly committee, maybe there are certain things that have not come on the agenda and somebody would want to propose. So I don't know whether we capture that in the terms of reference, or it's the way we communicate with committee members.
Thank you. CAO?
I think it's a little bit of both, but there definitely is a terms of reference distinction there that the council might want to address. So as far as reaching out and reminding members that they can add stuff, I think there's always something to go on between the chair and the staff person who's on the committee to make sure that happens. But the PAC is different from, say, Age Friendly, in that Age Friendly and a number of the other committees, that the discretionary advisory committees of council say that they meet monthly, or generally that they meet monthly. Whereas PAC says meets only as required to discharge its duties. And that distinction is essentially to say it doesn't go out looking for agenda items. It meets to consider agenda items that have come down from council. So that's at your discretion. They could say just generally meets monthly, and then it would work like the other committees. But council would have to be willing to have PAC members adding items to the agenda that didn't first come through council.
Deputy Mayor?
And this, I guess, from my understanding, is there a concern around the members of the committee adding things onto the agenda that maybe I can't see? Might be helpful to know.
Would you like to respond, CAO?
I was kind of hoping somebody else would, because it's not really a question for me.
No, okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's a
could say
question
that
of
it's
council.
possible, so.
I mean, our protocol is the council sends information to the PAC for deliberation.
Yeah, they are an advisory committee to council.
Right. Not that the PAC is meeting to come up with ideas to send back to council.
That's right.
I don't
They are
believe,
responding to council.
right, like PAC is not the plan, they're an advisory board to council that would provide advice when asked.
Mm-hmm. And on those items, which specifically we have asked them for advice on.
Exactly. I believe that's a fair representation of the terms of reference, CAO.
Yeah, that's the distinction right now.
Councillor Now.
Yeah, I've been on PAC for the last 4 years and I'm the chair this year. But yeah, normally the request comes in for a development or whatever and comes to council. Council does the first initiation, then it gets referred to PAC, who discusses it and then comes up with recommendations to council. And that's all they can do is make recommendations to council. So yeah, it is a committee whereby we're at the discretion of council as to what we're discussing. It's not a public thing that I don't see what we could get from the public that could be discussed at PAC.
Thank you. Other comments? Deputy Mayor?
We don't have to change it now, but I think something that we might want to consider as we go down the path of changing the MPS, where there is input for changes to planning that do not necessarily come through the development agreement process, because that sort of seems to be what that has been used as a vehicle for. I think for me, planning is an ongoing thing. It's not you plan and then you're done with it. So there could be suggestions from community that don't come to council table because that avenue is not available. But I'm putting it out there that something we might want to consider, think about. I understand how this PSC is structured as it is right now. I guess now that I'm on this side of the table, I'll be going into it, looking at it from an effectiveness for council and for community purposes, and maybe down the road, we'll come up with a different suggestion that you folks might think about.
I think that's part of the continuing discussion of the relationship between council and committees and how the committee's activities are defined. And you're right, the MPS does figure largely in that. Councillor Carver, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, if we're finished with that issue, I just wanted to ask about the various suggestions that had been submitted about possible changes to consider for the terms of reference for committees. I think the deputy mayor and I had both sent in some ideas, and I just would like to know what channel they will follow now for discussion. And I'm wondering if they'll go to like, if we approve a committee of the whole process, is that where they would go to discuss those possible changes?
CAO?
Yeah, I guess it would, my thought would be it would go to two places. Like, obviously it could come up now if anybody wanted to, but if it doesn't come up now, there's two other ways the committee's policy would probably be reviewed. One is if the strategic plan, like we talked about with respect to economic development, if the strategic plan were to come out and say a committee would be a really appropriate vehicle to advance a specific area of strategic priority for the council, that might be a term, a short-term committee with a specific
Right.
focus, or a longer term, then that could establish a committee as coming out of that process. And then after that, you're right, at any time, if we have an informal all council policy kind of discussion area, then somebody could bring it up, and then that could give rise to a notice of motion or subsequent reconsideration.
I like the idea of tying it in with the strategic planning under governance, and then it all fits.
Yeah, the links are there.
It's all about where you put the time and the resources, including the resources of volunteers.
Mhm.
Any other comments? Okay,
So that serves as a last call for the committees at the moment.
for now. Yes,
Clerk,
for
are
now.
you comfortable to have what you need to go out to advertise for public members? Okay.
My understanding is that we will advertise as usual, except for Economic Development Committee.
Yeah,
And will we have the calendar out by early January or end of December?
I don't see how we could, because we don't know. Well, I guess if council is in agreement that they will stick with the second Tuesday, fourth Thursday, at least for the calendar, we could work on that. I don't know if we have enough time to get it out by the end of December, but maybe by first part of January. We'll try.
given
We have
that
everything we need now, unless anyone is going to step in to say that they want to make a motion. Otherwise, as soon as we can, I guess, is the answer, understanding that it is the holiday time.
Okay, all right,
Excellent.
everybody's happy. Everybody's got a schedule. Okay, then let's move on to staff report 6.3 on the 2020-2021 audit. I think this is a pretty straightforward item.
There's a recommendation that's presented there. I'm just loading it up here on the screen. So the recommendation is to go out to a request for proposals process with respect to the audit. It certainly hasn't been done in the memory of any current staff. It is a good practice. Manager of Finance puts some consideration in here about it. But at the end of the day, it's something we would need council's approval for, because council appoints the auditor under the MGA. So there's no point in doing a request for proposals if council is not inclined to consider the result.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I have some concerns on this item, and I'm honestly not inclined to test the waters with an RFP at the moment. My thinking is, I think there's some information in the deck that gives the impression that our audit costs are dramatically higher than similar sized or larger towns, when I think our total bill to Deloitte is obviously fairly reflected in the documentation, but what they do for us is far beyond what you would consider a standard audit. And council's made the decision over the last few years to have Deloitte augment our limited finance team in support of the preparation of the financial statements. And one of the ramifications of those decisions is that we're left with time and materials professional services costs. And those costs have trickled up, albeit, Deloitte does a much higher level of engagement for us than they would do for a similar sized community, where a lot of that work is done by in-house staff, where we've made the decision to not have that fall to our in-house staff for a variety of reasons. So given our challenges on our reporting and the real significant impact of having a new auditor be introduced into the mix, it's not crystal clear to me that our objectives of enhanced reporting can be met at the same time we completely change and bring in a completely new relief pitcher deep into the ninth inning, using that analogy. So I do think the CAO's point about it's good practice to test the waters for prices, but it'd be my guess is that that we will quickly find that that the audit costs are very competitive priced, and but what we're asking for is not just the audit. And I think that our scoring that would have to be associated with the analysis of the RFP responses would have to really be well crafted, because you absolutely get what you pay for. And saving a nickel on the audit could absolutely cost you much, much more money if you're not getting the kinds of benefits that this council's received over at least over the last 4 years by having a very diligent partner in our audit provider.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you. I was about to take the other side of that argument, in part because our costs are about almost double Lunenburg's costs, with essentially the same audit requirements. They have an electrical utility, we have one, and so on and so forth. I take Councillor Feeney's comments to heart, but I put it in the context of the fact that our G&A line item in the budget has gone from $370,000 a year to $680,000 a year over the last 4 years, and wonder if we've added $300,000 to our general and administration costs, why we continue to have to pay that kind of elevated cost for our auditor as well.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, please.
And what I was hoping to understand of Councillor Feeney's concerns, will you feel that we will not get, if the RFP went out with particular details with what we receive currently, you feel we will get from Deloitte a raised fee or something like that? Wouldn't they be competing for the same?
I mean, this is just a personal opinion, but I believe that, you know, Councillor Wilson's observation, is reasonable but just doesn't have the context on what services we're receiving from Deloitte. The basket of services that represents the $40,000+ is a lot more than just the audit. I think the CAO would certainly agree with that. They're supporting us to a much higher degree than I think a similar engagement, simple audit engagement from a similar sized town. And we saw that with, having a partner come to our audit committee with financial statements of, literally the day of the audit committee. So we're a heavy load for a variety of reasons, the complexity of our financial statements, but also I think there has to be some appreciation for what our staff does internally versus what similar community staff does internally. And not sure I'd feel entirely comfortable having the breadth of the conversation in a public forum, but I'd suggest that what we're paying for is far more than just an audit. And it's not, if we only engage for an audit, I think we will get lower prices, but we'll suddenly discover that, in my opinion, we will really need to significantly address our financial reporting requirements. Anyway, those are just my thoughts.
CAO?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's right. I think these are all great points, and I think the Manager of Finance's comments there were reflective of that. The Deputy Mayor, to my ear, asked if we were able to sufficiently scope, to Councillor Feeney's point, the significant amount of work that we do contract, which we do, in a few different areas. Would we be able to expect that the current auditor would bid and that their price would be about where it is or competitive with where it is? On my end, I don't have any reason to suspect otherwise. I think we note in the report that the motivation for this isn't about getting a cheap price. It's not necessarily even an apples to apples comparison. Is something Luke, I think, says in the report. We do require certain things from the auditors, but to go out to the market and say to our current and other auditors, this is explicitly what we require, what are you going to charge? Is a good practice, I think, to do periodically. The question is when. Like the timing of the major fire station project, you got to think about when to go out to tender. Is this the right time during COVID? There's some question. I think that we can adequately scope it, so I have confidence that we can properly describe what we're looking for, and that if council is inclined to say we need to have our statements by a certain date every year, which has been a challenge, then I think it would be a good idea to get a contract with an auditor. I don't believe we'll necessarily be switching auditors, and I don't think that should be in any way presumed. Almost all of the time that I've been involved with an audit tender, the auditor was retained, but they did have to agree to a certain scope and certain requirements then. So I still would recommend that we go out, but I'll probably make the same recommendation again in the future if we don't do it this year, as per our procurement policy.
Deputy Mayor.
I think I would be willing to say, let's test the waters. I understand the concerns, but I also think that in this time of day, it's good to be competitive, and we might get a competitive bid that does the same thing, or Deloitte can come back and say, well, you know what, we can do it for even slightly less than we're doing it now. So I would be ready to make the motion if Councillor Feeney is okay with it.
Councillor Carver had a question.
Yes, I have a question, which is having put out an RFP and we get responses, are we as a town bound to select one of those responses?
CEO?
I mean, it's probably a question for our solicitor. I'll do my best to say that if we have conforming bids, we are expected to either award one of those bids or cancel the request for proposals in a manner that doesn't result in an award. So if you have a project that you don't have to do, you can cancel it. In this case, it's a project that we have to do. So if we were to dismiss it, we wouldn't be able to just go back to the same auditor.
Okay, so I just wanted to be sure I understood that part. And I would certainly support a motion to put out the RFP, having now heard several times the impulse to do so over my 8 years on council. And so it seems to me it's time to just check it out.
If I could, one question, Councillor Feeney and CAO, when we talk about the work that Deloitte does for us now, and Councillor Feeney talked about you get a price for an audit, but then you've got all these add-on pieces that we ultimately have to get that's going to cost us more money. Can we, in doing the RFP, have all those add-ons identified up front so that their quote would include the add-ons?
Well, I think we adequately can. I guess since you put the question to Councillor Feeney and I, if Councillor Feeney would like to be involved in reviewing the draft and making sure we do, I'd love to have him involved. But I do believe we can reflect it.
Like I'm happy to be involved. My gut tells me that we, far from the impression given by the documentation that Deloitte is expensive, like my gut tells me that we've gotten a very, very fair deal given the amount of work that they've supported over the last few years, bringing us up to the point where we are now. But that being said, I think if there's an RFP, we should be prepared for the reality that, I mean, I think we heard last year from our partner presentation that there was a lot of ramp up costs to get the newly consolidated financial statements and with the new process and the new accounting standards implemented. So we'll see. I have my doubts whether there's a lot of incremental savings to be had here. I think this is a real, I do think the information is misleading, but I'll, you know, obviously if the will of council's to proceed, then we'll see where the vote takes us.
Okay. Who's going to make the motion? Councillor Burdick.
I wasn't going to make a motion quite yet. I just wanted to, with all of this, I am really interested in knowing what all those different things are that are, and I guess once this is prepared, we would be able to see what all the things are that are included in addition to the audit that you're referring to, Councillor Feeney.
The add-ons.
The add-ons, yeah.
Yeah, at $400 an hour, it doesn't take too long to add on to add-ons.
Councillor Wilson.
And I guess that illustrates my concerns very well, is that this kind of feels to me like mission creep, where they've come around and for $400 an hour, they'll do this little bit of stuff over here and this little bit of stuff over there. And I would be much happier if we got an RFP issued for an audit, a plain and simple audit, and then when the other stuff reared its head, find ways to deal with that in-house or elsewhere that doesn't cost us $400 an hour.
Yeah, I think my final point would be, I wouldn't describe it as mission creep. I would describe it as a lifeguard swimming out into a stormy ocean to save a drowning swimmer.
You've seen that movie.
Huh.
Deputy Mayor. Thank you,
Um,
Councillor Wilson.
So I would move a motion that council directs staff to issue a request for proposal to conduct the town's 3-year annual audits with an option to extend up to an additional 2 years, two additional years. One thing I wanted to add to that was that the audit be adequately scoped with regards to what's happening right now, which I think the CEO has mentioned they can properly do, so that whatever we're getting sort of reflects what's being done now, and we can make the decision then.
I think I would prefer fully scoped as opposed to adequately scoped.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, I'll second the motion.
Second the motion?
Second.
Second. Moved and seconded that we raise an RFP to go to the marketplace to call for bids for a fully scoped audit process for the town. On the question, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay. Thank you. Fire station project update.
All right, this is going to be a fairly regular fixture on the agenda as this project moves forward, but we had not had an update on the official agenda since the new council had come into office. So this is an official update on the project and an opportunity to ask questions. As noted there is a virtual public open house coming up next week, essentially to provide the same status update to the public.
Okay. No questions? Okay, let's go to the local improvement bylaw.
Edie Mayer has his hand up.
He gets, the deputy mayor.
I'll have to put myself front and center. This might be it's a very small thing, but I guess it's a cultural learning for me. I was just curious. Do fire halls have to be red in color? There's something that makes them red in color.
I don't
Okay.
think.
Will this one in particular be red in color? Because I've seen that that's the color chosen.
I think that counts as detailed design and not structural or foundational. So there probably is a chance to discuss it. But it had, I think, the concept art, obviously, it had been assumed, but that's probably more of an autopilot. I don't know. Yeah, could be something for council to discuss.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting a change. I'm just curious. Like I said, it's for my own cultural understanding. This is something about red, and for me, it speaks something totally different.
I don't know. Councillor Feeney? Your
Well, I
thoughts
live,
on red?
my house is red. I'm sort of partial to red. But I think that's an interesting concept, though.
Okay.
Yeah, me too, Joe. I always love a red house.
Councillor Now will have a bucket of paint ready to go. Councillor Now, you have a comment?
Yeah, we hadn't really discussed color and that. I think that was something in the proposed project. I don't know that they actually have chosen red as the color of the metal siding.
Okay. Might be a question to ask our contractor, just to put the bug in his ear.
Well, yeah, I think at this point it's more down to, do we want to weigh in? Because I'm sure we can still. So if we want to, as a council, there will be additional design check-ins. We can ask for that as a
Those kinds of things.
Or if we want
Okay.
Richard to ask his members, sure, you can do that too.
What about the local improvement bylaw? That's item 6.5.
Sure, I'm just loading it up on, actually, could we get a motion to accept for information the last report? I was just trying to stick to that as a good practice if somebody would be willing.
Okay.
So
Councillor Feeney moves. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now, accept the report for information purposes. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay.
Okay, local improvement. So understanding this might seem to be quite a significant bylaw to be coming to council with relatively little prior discussion. The draft doesn't need to be included at this stage. We can go to a PIM on just the concept, but I wanted to provide a draft just to kind of give council an understanding of what we were talking about. Not sure if people feel, based on reading it, that they have an understanding of how this mechanism would work, but essentially what I'm suggesting we do is to have the first step, a public information meeting, to consider with residents the possibility of bringing in a bylaw that would allow for the cost sharing of infrastructure projects. And this is an example of such a bylaw based on the HRM's bylaw and a few other units that kind of use a similar template. But we could certainly amend it. At this point, it's more about the PIM, which would be an opportunity just to hear from residents. Would you be willing or interested in this type of a formula? And most specifically, what number of residents would need to consent to have a charge applied to residents in a particular area?
What kind of information would the PIM include, CAO? When we have the meeting, what will the people be?
It's a good question. I think it would include essentially the information that's presented in the staff report with the proposed bylaw, but written out in a way that is more accessible for somebody who's new to the subject. At least that's my intention at the moment. I didn't have any other materials to present. We could provide more examples. I guess I get a little bit concerned because ultimately the bylaw can be used quite broadly, and I wouldn't want to put words in council's mouth to say we would consider using it for, one or another type of infrastructure in one or another situation.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Deputy Mayor.
So to help me understand it a little bit more, if I can maybe use a scenario, for instance, if I live on a street that the road that comes up is owned by the town. It needs some improvements in one way, shape or form. And I'd like to talk to council or ask council to make improvements so that I can maybe be able to access a part of my property that I can't access because it's in a particular portion that the road isn't that great after my home. Is this the kind of thing that that would be applicable to, or is it just utilities and things like that?
Road extension is a possibility. I think one of the challenges in Mahone Bay is that we don't have a lot of surveyed unopened roads.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're describing in other towns, the town of Shelburne, which is all surveyed, would be a real simple process to expand on a road, and it's commonly used there when you want to do an extension, open up new lots for service. In Mahone Bay's case, we would have to take some kind of an action to lay out the streets that don't exist and say that this is where we would be continuing them. But otherwise, if we have the footprint, if you say, for example, said, I don't have a sidewalk that goes up to my house, it stops a block away. What about extending the sidewalk all the way up? Then yeah, that's an example, street sidewalks and utilities.
Okay.
Councillor Carver.
So I'd like to understand whether this is completely coming from the town's interest or need, or whether some interest or need has been expressed by the public in this kind of arrangement.
Yeah, well, I don't want to, without naming names, I will say that, people do come to me and say, this big infrastructure project the town has made a priority of, but it's stalled. And I really, 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 really want to see this happen. Is there any way that residents could help to make it happen? And I always have to say, technically, no, but absolutely the possibility could be there. And essentially the council, this is how it could be there.
Councillor Burdick.
It seems reasonable to put this forth to the public then. So I would agree with proceeding in that way, just to get that feedback from more people about how they would feel about this.
Councillor Feeney.
So I guess a question to the CEO. So would you be of the opinion that this would not drive a potential liability to the town, but rather provide a vehicle to proceed with an investment that would benefit an individual homeowner or a business owner and the town?
Yeah, I think it, really is a method that town has used back as far as the 1920s. We've seen now through our centennial research. If a business owner, for example, feels that their end of the street should be better served by sidewalks, then even going back as far as the first installation of sidewalks in Mahone Bay, it was cost shared with the business owners in that stretch. Like that's a traditional approach to putting in new infrastructure. As far as, will the town be pushed to consider contribution to projects that the town would otherwise not be? The way the bylaw is constructed there, and again, this is just a draft for consideration, council would always have a discretion as to the town contribution. So there is a possibility, and asset management may inform this, where the town would come along and say under what conditions the town would guarantee a contribution of a certain amount based on the town's priorities. So you could say, in an instance where we're talking about a water line extension, that the town would be always willing to pay 50% of the cost of the water line installation if a sufficient number of residents were willing to sign on to pay the other 50%. Or the town could say when a sufficient number of residents has come requesting to be able to share in the cost, the council would deliberate, make a decision about the town's share and what we could afford, and the residents would then have to agree based on what the town was contributing if they would pay the rest. So it can be done in a case by case, and that's what this approach would suggest to begin with. And then it can also be done in a more proactive way to provide clarity to developers, for the most part, is the purpose of that.
When you talk about the case by case piece, will the information be available to the citizens in the public information meeting to know what the parameters or the criteria would be for the town to respond to a particular project? Let's
Well,
take the
the-
water extension piece.
Yeah,
You'd have to have X number of properties interested to take the water and or the sewer from the town. In order for the town to contribute Y amount of money, and there's going to be a certain recovery on that money. Will those kinds of information pieces be available to the citizens to help them understand what we're getting into?
yeah, that's the intention. I think what we'll do is there is a formula included in there, but we'll make a slide as Maureen has done on any number of, but it'll be me this time, on any number of other policies and bylaws to just illustrate, what are we talking about when we talk about this formula? Here's an example where there are 10 residents on the road and 9 of those 10 residents come to council, and council says we're willing to share 50% of the costs, and just to kind of illustrate that.
Okay. Councillor Feeney.
What is the virtue of the bylaw versus council just deliberating about a potential co-investment through a delegation, individual, or presentation to council?
I guess there's a couple of ways. And one is that it creates a structure that gives residents the ability to know and to approach the town, and for developers the same, because there's provisions around new subdivision development as well. But it also, I think it is encouraging in a sense on our part to reach out to the community and say, and this is where I say the town could establish specific thresholds based on priorities later, but to say through this bylaw that the town is willing to cost share, I think a legal agreement in an ad hoc fashion would be at least as complex. So to have it pre-prescribed and go through that process, yeah, I think there's some advantages. I wouldn't say it's impossible to do it on a case-by-case basis, but there's certainly a lack of clarity, and some towns have ended up actually sharing ownership of public infrastructure with donors in an ad hoc arrangement, and then somebody subsequently comes on and asks to expand beyond that and say, well, you got to check with those guys because they built it. So you want to be careful about how you do that.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Just responding to Job, I think Dylan has explained it very well. When I look at it, it sort of, for me, gives sort of a very good objective process that community folks won't get to maybe just assign or think that this particular council is being difficult and doesn't want to accept what I'm proposing, but we have sort of guidelines that already are set so that we're not sort of building, I guess, the case on a case-by-case basis. So I like it. I would like to move the motion if folks are at that place.
Okay.
I just have one more question, Mayor, and then I'm
Please.
prepared to weigh in on the motion. So, like, are there any constraints at all for does the town have any, if the bylaw is in place that a developer can come in, develop a subdivision, and we're based on some predetermined formula required to allocate taxpayers' resources, not based on town priority or fiscal reality of the town, like, who would be the arbiter of whether you could proceed or not, given our financial limitations, our debt borrowing ratios, our ability to take on significant debt, where the particular project would fit within our 10-year capital priority plan? Like, who's the arbiter of something that not, some item from a developer knocks off our town's number 3 priority or number 4 priority, for example?
CAO.
Well, council would be. I mean, there's nothing in there that ties council to making any contribution. What it does do is if council decides to proceed with the project based on either entirely resident share or a share from council and a share from residents, then it prescribes the manner in which those costs will be allocated among the residents. And it also provides for external funding. So it may be a situation where we get federal provincial money and residents cost share the local contribution of the project. So there may be no municipal money in that case, but it will always come back to council to approve any municipal share before the remaining share that is calculated less municipal and external funding gets allocated back to the residents.
So this bylaw does not distill a right or privilege to a developer or landowner. It just provides them a vehicle to introduce the investment idea to town council for deliberation.
And later we may come up with conditions under which we would say we're more or less willing to contribute based on, again, asset management considerations.
Fair enough. Thank you.
This motion is just to go to the PIM stage to discuss with the citizens their reaction to the proposal. Somebody want to make the motion, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I'd like to move a motion that council directs staff to schedule a public information meeting in January 2021 to receive feedback on the proposed local improvement bylaw.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Burdick. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried.
I think you had a question from Councillor Carver.
Sorry.
Oh, I can never tell if it's a motion hand or it's a
Well,
agreement hand.
you were quick on the trigger to call the vote when I had my hand up. Anyway, so my understanding is that as this process unfolds, council has the ability to also tweak this draft policy. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a PIM, so we wouldn't, I mean, I keep saying this is a draft policy presented purely as an example of what a draft policy could look like. But after the PIM, we would actually present a draft policy and then council would determine if we wanted to amend it. And it might look like this, but the PIM might very well come back with all kinds of great information.
Yeah,
We would need to make changes. Yeah.
So it's the normal process will afford us another opportunity to do some fine tuning. So one more time, all in favor? Okay, motion is carried once again. Thank you. Let's go to the 6.6 strategic plan, and I am taking note of the time. We're cranking down to 9 o'clock. We've still got an in-camera session to go, and we've got 10 minutes for the public, if there's anybody out there. Strategic plan 2021, 6.6. Mr. Hyde.
I think in the interest of time that this one is pretty self-explanatory. We've been going through a process of orientation with the new council, and every year we get into our strategic planning process in the new year with a new council. There's an expectation that there will be some additional requirements to do that. It's not just a review. It's an opportunity to make sure that the plan is fully reflective of council's priorities. So a recommendation here is to serve that end, to make sure we're able to get a strategic plan in place ahead of the annual budget process. So the recommendation's up on the screen there, but it's a two-part. One could be done as one motion, or two, to issue a request for proposals for facilitation services with respect to the development of the strategic plan, and to develop a draft public engagement plan associated with the strategic plan in line with our public engagement policy.
Okay.
I would
Deputy
be
Mayor?
happy to move that.
The Deputy Mayor had his hand up first, Councillor Carver.
Just a quick question. I'm not against the motion. The question I had was based on what's happened in the past. There is no evaluation or monitoring or review of the strategic plan that happens.
That would be a great thing to put more into the new strategic plan around. The current strategic plan has a section in that respect, and it just says council will undertake an annual review and update of the plan. But I think at this particular moment, it would be a good discussion. Does council want to begin the new strategic planning process with an evaluation of the prior plan? And would council want any role from staff in doing that type of an evaluation, or would it just be a discussion amongst council? Good things to consider either now or while these things move forward. That would still be something that we would want to consider.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
I was prepared to make the motion that has been proposed.
Okay.
Would you like me to read the whole
Go
thing?
ahead, we'll
Or
do the motion and then we'll act on the question if any come up.
would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
I move that council direct staff To A, issue a request for proposals for facilitation services in relation to the development of a 2021-25 strategic plan. And B, develop a draft public engagement plan associated with the 2021-25 strategic plan for consideration of council.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick seconds. Councillor Feeney, you had a question.
I do. I guess my thinking is that, I think I heard several times through the campaign about a reluctance to proceed with, facilitation, $20,000 worth of facilitation for goal formation and action identification. My thinking is that, we did a recent review of the strategic plan, albeit it's at least a year old since the last edit. We've had almost the entire suspension of this year's capital program. We have a very significant backlog of approved prioritized capital projects that, I think traditionally would be considered the capital priorities for the town. And my sense of things is I doubt they are going to change materially through the next budget process, because they're all the things that I believe everyone on council supports. There's the climate change initiatives, there's the wastewater, stormwater initiatives up and down Main Street. We're well aware of the capital priorities, but given the council package we just reviewed, and we saw 25 capital items that have not been started yet. I wonder about what the virtue is on having another $20,000 worth of consultation. At the same time, we're also doing consultation with regard to the land use bylaw process. I can't recall a $20,000 worth of facilitation that happened, 4 years ago, but suddenly our town of 800 taxpayers suddenly has enough largesse to be able to afford pretty expensive, what's the term? Goal formation and action identification. Well, I don't know, is that something we have to have a $20,000 facilitator do? We're talking about having a meeting of the whole. I wouldn't mind having one meeting of the whole first before we have a $20,000 facilitator facilitate what we would probably discuss in that set of meetings. So anyway, those are my thoughts for this evening.
Okay, Councillor now.
I just like to reiterate what Joe was saying. I've been hearing a lot from different residents too on the amount of money that's spent on consultations and facilitators. So yeah, I think we could pursue it a bit further before we go into that kind of an expense. And I think we're getting different feedback on that.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Not that I disagree with what my fellow councillors have said. I think facilitation would work wonders to get us a very good plan. Well, my thinking is maybe not now. Maybe we can delay it a little bit and get our feet sort of on the ground. And one of the pieces about strategic planning for me is proper engagement of those who are planning, so council and the community. And I think in this environment with COVID, it doesn't rent itself very well for doing very good engagement. Yes, you can do lots of good online things, but there's challenges in there. And I'm hopeful that we will soon have a vaccine, and maybe we'll go to a place where we can meet face to face a little bit more. I think that offers itself better for that kind of stuff. So I would say maybe we can consider delaying this and revisit it maybe around March there and see if we're at a good place. I will not be against spending the money, maybe not 20,000, but I wouldn't be against spending the money to get very good facilitation, because it's very helpful to the product.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I don't want to be repetitive, but I agree with Councillor Feeney that a lot of what we were going to do in 2020 probably didn't get done because of the pandemic. And it seems reasonable to me to sit down in the first quarter and review where we are and see if there's some adjustments need to be made to what would have been year 3 of the old plan, and see if we can get that done this year and then revisit the whole thing later on in the year.
Okay. CAO was next, Councillor Carver.
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. So I'm going to say very briefly that I felt it was necessary to cite the kind of costs that other units have paid. We did this around the audit. I think councillors made a special point of referencing the apples to apples comparison was important. So I think it's disingenuous to talk about $20,000 as an assumed cost. It's no more assumed than it is that we would save $22,000 on the audit. So just to take that point, this is comparative cost. Council will have the opportunity to decide and award a contract. As far as the timing, I guess I'm going to say why this is a cycle. For staff to be able to move ahead with the budget. Actually, before I do this, I'm going to make a note about the delay of things due to COVID. The capital budget is full of items that are not actioned because of a lack of federal and provincial funding. I wouldn't attribute it to COVID at all. It's an absolutely common occurrence. It's common every year. There are a couple of items that haven't moved forward due to COVID, but I would say other than the items that are dependent on federal and provincial funding, we'll have completed the majority of the initiatives in the budget this year. We're not finished the year. We're not even, we're about 2/3 of the way through the year. So there are still some projects to go. But ultimately, I think council needs to be aware that dependent on federal provincial funding is the main reason items are parked. Anyway, I'm going to say with respect to the cycle, we have a new council, as has been noted by a few, we have enormous numbers of projects on the go. I think that's an argument in favor of doing some strategic planning at the level of council. I think as it stands right now, staff's direction is very spread out. We have a limited number of resources and it's exceedingly difficult to focus them effectively. We're starting to get into a place where until council sits down together and says, how do we really want to spend our time, our resources, our energy? We're a lot less effective, I think, than we could be. Because honestly, we've got too many irons and too many fires to really move effectively on some in council's interest. So if we approach the annual budget process as planned in March on the current basis, I think that it will be very difficult for council to ensure that you're able to get your priorities to the surface. I think it may be frustrating for some members of council to feel that there's no opportunity to really put any kind of a stamp on things because resources are committed, and they are committed. But at the same time, it's a decision of council how we focus our limited resources, and that's where the strategic planning process comes in. So I'll say if council wants to delay the whole annual budget process, it wasn't too long ago that we did our annual budget in June, July. It is a possibility. I certainly would never recommend it. We've been trying to move away from it. But I'd strongly encourage council to proceed with strategic planning or delay the whole budget process on that basis, rather than lose one of 4 years that you have to set your priorities as a group. But that is council's discretion at the end of the day. We haven't always had a strategic plan and we haven't always done the budget by the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
I was actually going to say what the CAO has just said, but coming at it from what I've perceived as a councillor, having been part of the strategic plan that was developed 2 councils ago with external facilitation.
2012.
Yeah, so, and that since then, there's just been tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. So it really feels like it needs a fresh start. And I had started this term when I heard the CAO proposing the idea of having strategic planning sooner rather than later. I really resisted that. I thought, oh, we can't do that now. It's too much right now. But having heard staff, the challenges of working with a strategic plan that was developed by other people at a different time, and that it's very problematic. So that we really need to develop our strategic plan with this team. And the sooner the better. And I've really come to value the way the strategic plan links into everything and the way our staff is making that work, all the linkages. So the challenge for an external facilitator is getting the right facilitator. That's my pitch.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I guess I'll just
Councillor
add one thing
Carver-
about the RFP process is to say that unlike our discussion about the RFP for the audit, where you have to do an audit, you don't have to do this. So it is worth noting that if you go out to the market and you hate all of the proposals, you don't have to award any of them.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, question about that process, CAL. Do we go out to specific vendors for this kind of work, or do we advertise in the paper, or how does that RFP process work? Because I would, as an aside, recommend, based on my limited experience, that we don't use retired counselors from another jurisdiction.
We would go through the provincial procurement site. So that's what we're required to do under our policies. And I think with something like this, we'll get at least a dozen interested parties. There's a lot of facilitators out there.
Deputy Mayor?
Well, I think the CEO has made his case very well, and Councillor Carver's support sort of sways my thinking about it. Like I said, I think I'm in support of the planning. I wasn't so sure about the timing. If we strongly feel that we can take a crack at it, I think it would be very helpful. The one thing that I would want to see is that most of the time I've seen plans just put in place and then there's no proper monitoring and evaluation that we're getting there. But at least as part of the RFP, there's a requirement that an evaluation plan, a monitoring and evaluation plan is part of the strategic plan, so that at least we can know what milestones we have and how we'll be able to know we're getting there, as opposed to just a review by council.
Okay. Councillor Carver mentioned the 2012. We didn't have a strategic plan, I don't believe, before 2012. And we hired a former CAO, actually, who walked us through the development of our first one. And it was quite an exercise, quite an eye-opening exercise. But then as years went by, we tweaked and we tweaked. And I honestly don't feel that a strategic plan, you should be throwing it out and building a brand new one. Things like traffic safety and safety for families and having a good place to live and providing services that our clients expect. Surely that doesn't change in the strategic plan. What changes is possibly things like how we react to pandemics, possibly, or other new issues that are having an effect on our town council. And what I'm suggesting is that, at least in the short term, it might do us well to look at our strategic plan, take a day, go away, look at the strategic plan, see what is still valid in the opinion of council, what needs to be adjusted, what needs to be eliminated, what needs to be added. I would suggest that because of the consistent approach of the town in its strategic plan, we may not need a consultant to do this. And I fully appreciate the CAO's advice that you do the strategic plan in January, you do the operational plan in February, and you do your budget plan in March. And the 1st of April, your ducks are all in a row. Tain't easy, but it can be done. Deputy Mayor?
But the one piece that I probably would strongly encourage is to get an external facilitator, whether it's that review or it's a strategic plan, because I think they bring a certain level of objectivity that in our conversations might not be there, and they will provide a structure that would be very helpful to all of us. I've found in my I guess day job that having an external facilitator helps an immense amount when you're doing strategic planning. So I will strongly encourage that we consider that.
We consider the consultant,
Yes,
or the facilitator?
yes.
Yeah. Councillor Burdick.
I do think that it's really helpful for us as a council, as a whole council, as well as for the public, to have a easily referred to plan, so that the town knows exactly what we're doing. And there can be definitely the feeling that there's a grab bag of different issues, and there is, in a way. It does include a lot of variety, and I imagine there will be a lot of crossover with previous plans or directions. But I do also agree that it would be really helpful to have somebody externally help move things along.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from staff about how they see the burden on them in terms of doing it with an external facilitator versus not using an external facilitator.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it in terms of being the burden on staff. I think that Deputy Mayor made a really good point about the value of a facilitator is in part the objectivity, that they come into it with a really specific mission. You know, they're mercenary for a reason. A good facilitator doesn't even need to know anything about the subject matter. They just know how to facilitate you, who are the subject matter experts. And so staff would be a part of the process. We'd rather be a subject matter expert. We'd rather be participating in the process. I would hope there'd be a role for staff to give input into the process. Would it be possible for staff to try to facilitate a process? I mean, I think that there is a possibility there, but I would strongly recommend against it, just more based on the value of the having of an external facilitator. And of course, there is a resource issue, the amount of time that would be involved in trying to organize these sessions only with in-house resources and the current workload. But I really think it should be about the benefits of the facilitation service.
Yeah.
Councillor Feeney.
So I believe the motion will be about, directing staff to proceed with an RFP. And I think the CAO and fellow councillors have made the point that there's a virtue in proceeding, at least with the RFP, to gather that information about the cost of a third-party facilitator. So, I'll be certainly supporting that motion. I do think that we should be cognizant of the fact that, based on our earlier conversation in the special meeting today, we are driving, due to compressed timelines and the uniqueness of this calendar year, a very significant burden on staff and council, for that matter, around our various initiatives. I think the land use bylaw process that we're going through now is going to be incredibly heavy lifting to get us over the goal line, however many months that's going to take. I think we all know that the budget process required, I think last year, at least 6 or 8 special meetings outside of standard council meetings, and to try to get us through a 4-year strategic plan in the next, let's call it 8 weeks, seems like an ambitious goal. I'm all for it, but I do think that we should put in context the conversation we were having earlier today about the limitations that everybody has, about there are only so many hours in a day and in a week, especially for staff. So I would have preferred to take the deputy mayor's counsel and defer this item for 6 months, and let the dust settle, where we're able to engage on a more interpersonal level in a more face-to-face manner. But no time is of the essence, and I think if we're going to proceed, we should proceed now and send out the RFP and see where that gets us by the end of the year.
Okay. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Feeney has just reminded me of a thought that I had when we were doing the MPS review process. A thought struck me that as we review that, particularly around housing and how that process will affect the kind of housing and zoning that we can take into consideration, without a strategic plan to sort of say, these are the kinds of people we want to attract to our town, and these are the kinds of things that we want to see going forward. The sort of, for me, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So I appreciate that. Yes, it would be a crazy, I guess, time for us in terms of time and being able to allocate that, but it's also lining up things alongside each other so that we're able to do a good visioning for ourselves. So I think let's bite the bullet and do this and see how it goes.
Okay. Anyone else? Do I hear a motion?
I think we're in discussion on the motion, aren't we? Yeah, Mo's nodding.
Who made the motion? Okay.
So
All
we
right,
just-
Motion was
Just
made
need
by
somebody to-
Councillor Carver and seconded by Councillor Burdick.
would you repeat the motion, please?
That council directs staff to A, issue a request for proposals for facilitation services in relation to the development of a 2021-25 strategic plan, and B, develop a draft public engagement plan associated with the 2021-25 strategic plan for consideration of council.
So the potential to follow on to what the deputy mayor was saying, that the potential to delay the budget process for the new fiscal year, we might want to undertake as a separate motion in the future.
My suggestion would be that if this one were to go through and then staff come back with the public engagement plan, that is going to be the thing that causes you to question whether you need to delay on the budget, because
Okay,
even if council's through facilitation and reasonably satisfied with the draft plan, if you're then going out to do engagement and considering making any subsequent changes and you really want to not prejudge the budget, you may get into that question at that time. But that we'll be able to revisit that in January
Okay.
when we bring the
so
engagement.
we'll let that go for now. Deputy Mayor, you have a comment?
Just curious, will not including the monitoring and evaluation piece that I was talking about in this motion have any ill effects to the RFP?
Well, I made the note, and I'm certainly intending to include it. But if council wants, you can amend this motion to say, specifically including in the RFP an evaluation piece. But I've got the note down, so it's my intention to do it either way.
Okay. So do you want to make an amendment to the motion, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I would like to make an amendment to the motion that that council directs staff to issue a request for proposals for facilitation services in relation to the development of a 2021 to 2025 strategic plan, including a monitoring and evaluation plan for that, and B, develop a draft public engagement plan associated with the strategic plan for consideration of council.
And isn't that the same as what Councillor Carver?
Just a couple of words different in there.
Yeah, but they really should be a separate amendment, Deputy
Okay.
Mayor, to the original motion.
So can I, Francis, do you mind?
Yes,
So I
you
think
will help me. Yeah.
the amendment was that within the original motion, we would just add the text, including a monitoring and evaluation plan for same, when we say that we are hiring a consultant to assist with the development of a 20 to 25 strategic plan
Okay,
for 2021.
do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Carver?
Oh,
Are you-
no, I wasn't seconding the deputy mayor's motion. So I think somebody else has to do that.
Yes, okay. Someone want to second the
If
deputy?
you
mayor's
and
motion?
Alice want it as a
Councillor
friendly
Key?
amendment, it's a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Okay,
you need to
we're
move it.
We're going to vote on the amendment?
A friendly amendment is fine.
You sure? Okay. So the original motion is amended. We'll now vote on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion is carried as amended. Don't like those friendly amendments.
Hey, thanks, everyone.
So it's now 9 o'clock. It's by policy time for
10-minute break.
a little break.
Oh, well, if you think it's necessary, if we can take a 10-minute break, certainly.
Well, if we don't have a 10-minute break, I'm going to close my screen and come back in a few minutes.
Well, I was going to say, if I thought we could be done in 15, I'd say don't take a 10-minute break. But if we're going to be
Oh,
here
that's
for
fine.
half an hour,
How do you feel
Let's-
about 5?
let's take our, Well, policy says 10. Five it is. And now, Francis, do you want to say something or are you voting for 5
No,
minutes?
no, I was saying five.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's 9 o'clock. We'll start again at 9:05. Smoke them if you got them.
Wondered if Maureen had a little cartoon plumber to put up on the screen or something like you do when you old TV shows would cut to a break.
You should
Cool to
find
go with
a
the
little
5-minute
meme.
break and then call someone by name.
All right, well, I'm going to sign out for a few.
5 minutes. Oh, jeez. Hello. Not done yet. Beep boop, beep boop, beep boop.
Did you get your tree yet? Still on mute, Mayor.
There you are.
There you go.
Okay, now we got her.
My, who
You
knew
guys are
that?
live streaming right now, so I just want to make sure you know.
That's okay. We were just talking about our Christmas trees. Nothing too contentious.
No. No, it's going to be a quiet Christmas this year. You got a couple of daughters coming home from,
Yeah, they're home.
are they?
Yeah, I just got home Friday.
Well, we're not going to be going to Metro to visit anybody and nobody will be coming here, unfortunately.
Christmas for two.
So the kids and the G kids and the GG kid will have to go it alone.
My Christmas tree trunk goes like this. It's like an S.
We were up the Tom Ernst woodlot last week. He's got some amazing trees. I don't know how big your house would have to be to put some of them in there, but
Yeah,
I
there's-
drove by the
some
Christmas
great
tree
looking
lot at
stuff.
Hammond's. I drove by the Christmas tree lot in Hammond's Plains yesterday. Not one tree. There'd
No
normally
kidding.
be a couple hundred trees there. Not one. Zero.
Yeah.
Such, who knew? I mean, if you can't bring in your temporary workforce because of COVID, pretty hard
No.
to chop down a couple 100,000 trees.
And people who might not normally bother with the tree because they would be away
Hmm.
are out getting a tree this year. What do we got left? Wayfinding strategy.
Is that the last item? Wayfinding?
No, then we've got, who's the one PAC appointment we have to make?
Councillor Burdick. We forgot her when we did the list last week.
Okay. So we'll appoint Councillor Burdick. And then we've got the signing authority. And then Councillor Carver has the cash gifts for members of council issue. Alice Burdick. Okay, and then we've got one committee report, but we should be able to zip through that as per policy unless there's something significant to discuss. There's no new business that I'm aware of. And then we've got the in-camera session for contract negotiations. So I'm betting on 9:30.
I think I'm
I got
probably a
money
little
on
longer,
I got money on 9:45.
Yeah.
at least.
Kelly, can you hear me?
Me? Yeah.
No, not you. I meant Kelly Redden.
The other Kelly, yeah. I don't know.
I'm just wondering if anybody is on, if anybody's online.
I can
Yeah,
answer
we
that.
have 10 people watching right now.
And do you have some questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
There she is. CAO, back to you. Welcome back, everyone. 6.7, the wayfinding strategy.
Sure. So this is on here. The actual report and the recommendation are out of date because council did accept that recommendation previously, and we did put out a brief survey. I believe the clerk sent around the results of the polling. Fairly conclusive, albeit this is a very, I think, a superficial question, but it is a superficial question. We've had an enormous amount of substantive feedback from the community over the past year over 2 different survey interactions around where do we need signage, what kind of signage, what should the emphasis of the signage be, and all of that will go into the next phase. But before the designer does that work that we've commissioned him to do, we need a single style in which he will do it. And so that's what the purpose was here, to find a single style of the proposed that we could give direction on. So hopefully council is inclined to give us a direction to go back to the designer and say, use this style of the 3 proposed. And if anyone has questions about that, or anyone wants to jump in and make a motion on the, motion on the basis of the survey result, or if you have any questions about that, just let me know.
Do you have a picture of the winner by any chance?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we can do that. What would be the best? Maureen, do you have a suggestion about the best way to do that? Let me go back to the package from our last meeting. Oh, I guess it's in the attachments on this one, is it? 1 second.
Councillor Carver.
Just while we're looking for that, one of the things that struck me of the comments that I noticed online, I don't know how many of them there were, but I like the color of the number 2, but I don't like the arrow of number 2. I like the arrow of number 1. So because it was such a simple, basic question, it's hard to know which elements really work, but.
It was
Yeah, it's it's always
from
the
column
issue.
A and 2 from column B sort of thing.
There's never anything perfect in that regard. This is the one up on the screen now that was the majority result. That's the option 2A.
And did you say it was a strong majority CAO?
Yeah, I mean, I would.
Relatively speaking.
Issue is it's a 3-way poll, so it's a majority. It's a strong in comparison to either of the other 2, which in Canada is how we do all of our elections, I guess.
Okay.
Mo, you had your. Did you want to make a comment about that?
Councillor Burdick? Oh,
Sorry, if you want, I can share my screen and show the 3 options together. I have the last reminder that we posted online. At least it would show the 3 options side by side.
Sure, I closed mine.
Yeah, I think I was wondering how many people, there's no way of knowing this, but how many people who just made comments on the Facebook posts actually did the vote. But who knows about that? I think it was 58 people in total, was it? Something like that?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. And obviously, this is one of those examples where if you were interested, hopefully you came and you responded to the poll, and then there may be a level of where there's just only so much interest. Oh, Mo, that was a whirlwind, but we're back to the group view now.
Yeah, I don't think you were seeing the right screen for some reason. I've got a million windows open. Sorry.
The numbers were pretty definitive. Out of the 58, 34 voted for item 2,
Well,
which was 58%.
there we go. So the center design is the most frequently chosen one. Deputy Mayor, do you have a comment?
No, I just had a question. What motion is the CEO looking for from us?
It's a good question because it's not in the report there. So what we're looking for here is a motion to direct staff to proceed on the basis of option 2A, which would be to go back to the designer and say, all right, now we need to do a number of different affirmation signs, a bunch of blade signs and everything using this template. And then that would come back to council and say, can we go to print, basically?
May I make a comment? I think it sort of biased the survey somehow to have only the one blue teal sign with that arrow. To have been fair, there should have been another teal sign with the small yellow arrow. I think that's all I'm going to say on that. I think it was a biased survey.
I think there were a number of
I think I'm ready to move the motion. I think we talked about this last time, and these are the 3 options that were given by the designer. So we went to them, I believe. So I'm ready to move the motion if we can at some point.
And that motion would be to direct staff to use
Option
2A,
2A, yeah.
the one in the center, and to
Yes.
direct the contractor to proceed.
Yeah, well, that's in order anytime now if that's at council's discretion.
Councillor Burdick? Are you
I'd
seconding?
like to second that. Yes, I'd like to
Okay.
second that motion.
Moved and seconded that 2A is the sign of choice. Councillor, now you had your hand up. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, just that I saw a lot of comments saying they liked the 2A, but with the other little smaller arrow.
Yeah. Councillor Feeney?
So Mayor, like what's the rush? Why don't we satisfy Councillor Carver's desire to see the other option? I'm sure the graphic designer would be happy to prepare it. And we'll take a look at it and talk about it in next meeting.
How does
And-
that sit with the things you heard, Councillor, now?
Yeah, I think that fits right in because, like I say, a lot of comments that I saw and heard were that they liked the design and the color of the one that's in the center, which is 2, but they would preferred to have the little orange arrow rather than the bigger arrow.
Okay.
I know, Mayor, I'd prefer to wait and get something that everyone is very enthusiastic about under the theme of once bitten, twice shy. I certainly am not I certainly don't trust my own judgment when it comes to marketing collateral material. So I'd be prepared to wait patiently and look for perfection if we can find it.
Okay. Councillor Carver?
I don't know if this would be along the lines of a friendly amendment, but would be to ask the designer to put up the two teal signs, one with the big arrow and one with the small arrow, so that those would get equal representation.
Oh, to have 2 different signs in use in the town? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, to sort of to do a runoff.
Oh, okay.
Election, a runoff vote.
CAO?
Oh, I was just gonna say that, wouldn't be asking, we can get the designer, I'm sure, to do option one in blue. The real thing would be putting it back out for a poll. So if we go back out, as we said, to a runoff poll and we say it's only the blue versions, it's the blue version of number one and it's the already existing blue 2A, then that would come back to council's meeting January 12th for consideration. So basically that's, we're taking 4 weeks to further delay the putting
No
out of the
one's driving
signage.
around looking for directions anyway.
So really that's, council's prerogative, but when we sometimes ask why we never get anywhere with things, I just want you to remember you did ask to wait 4 more weeks for this.
Okay, Deputy Mayor? You're muted, sir.
I'm fine with the friendly amendment.
It'd be easier if you withdrew your motion.
I withdraw my
and your
motion.
seconder agreed and would make a new motion to direct staff to go back to the sign designer to create 2 teal sign versions. Councillor Burdick?
I just have a question. Sorry, I'm adding this on now, but is that going to mean additional costs, or is this part of the service that the designer has right now?
Man with the money.
I'm not too concerned about the additional costs inherent in this. I am concerned eventually that the designer will say, you told me the scope of this project was to be done by January and it's April or May and we're going back for another round of public consultation. So at some point that may be an issue because we did tell him the expectation was for him to be delivering the work pretty early in the new year and he's got other contracts I'm sure he's looking at. But I doubt that the cost will be significant in having another blue version of the sign.
Tell them just one more item. That's it. Councillor Feeney?
Does council need to formally approve the final design format?
Based on prior experience, we're looking for council's approval before we commit the designer to do a bunch of additional work on that basis. Yeah, because we don't want to change it again.
I guess what I'm hearing that there will be a quick consensus around the final version of the format. I'd be prepared to wait, and if not, if we have to if there's another tool in the toolbox still and to get the official answer from council, then I'm sure we can figure that out if we don't want to lose the 3 weeks.
Well, I think the polling's gonna, if we go out to another poll, we get that out this week, but it would have to be, best case scenario, presuming Pierre's around, I think he will be, we could get a poll out by Friday or next Monday, then it would be open over the holiday. We wouldn't want to close it until New Year's. So, we really wouldn't have any opportunity with the polling to do anything before council's next meeting anyway.
So this motion then is to go back to the designer who will produce the 2 different teal variations, which staff will put into a simple poll to go to the public.
We'll call it a runoff.
Closure December 31st.
Right, or give or take. We'll just
Give
look
or
at that.
take. Okay. So somebody would choose to make that motion?
I'll make the
Councillor
motion.
Now, do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver, all in favor? Okay. We've got 2 teal signs.
I have to say that I had one other question about that, the wayfinding strategy. And I'll just put it out and ask if it can come back as information from staff at our next meeting in January the 12th, I believe. And it's about the concept of community branding versus town branding. And it has to do with the issue of council's commitment to revisit the town logo in the context of the wayfinding process. And it's the issue of community branding versus town branding and whether we could have some information about that at our next meeting in January. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but there's already, that's already in the list of council assignments. The report that we're going to provide will speak to that. But because of this delay, it wouldn't be until at least the second meeting in January now, because we're still going to be dealing with this issue on the first meeting in January.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on quickly. Council appointment to the Planning Advisory Committee, Councillor Burdick. This was where we missed your appointment to the Planning Advisory Committee at the last meeting. If somebody would like to make the motion to appoint, Councillor Feeney seconded. Who seconds the motion? Councillor Wilson does, to appoint Councillor Burdick to the Planning Advisory Committee. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to signing authority. We normally would have 3 members of council would have signing authority on the town's business paperwork, and 3 admin staff. Typically, it is the mayor, the deputy mayor, and 1 other member of council, the CAO, the finance manager, and the deputy CAO clerk would be the 3rd person. And usually 1 person from the council 3 signs and 1 from the admin 3 countersigns all of the checks and paperwork and whatever. So you have a motion there. We need a 3rd for the council side of the signing. This person would sign. Are you volunteering, Councillor Carter?
Well, I could volunteer, certainly. My question was going to be, do you need to have somebody who's easily accessible, can be called upon at the last minute? So
yeah,
it's somebody who has a fairly open schedule, not a full-time work schedule, blah, 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 and so on.
It's unusual to, even for me to have the deputy mayor sign.
Yeah.
And even more unusual for the alternate.
Yeah.
Actually, most of the time when we get into that, it's to sign my travel check because I can't sign my own. Right.
And during COVID, it's easy to forget this, but we used to go away to places from time to time.
Right.
So when that happens, then that's when the alternates really kick in.
Expense account reporting is very, very easy these days.
Well, I put my hand up. I'd be happy to volunteer.
Okay. Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, I don't see the motion, but I'm prepared to move that the mayor, the deputy mayor, and Councillor Carver be authorized as signing officers.
And the CAO, the deputy
CAO, the deputy CAO, and the finance manager.
Yes. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick. Okay. CAO.
I just want to note, because obviously this is seems a little odd that we have to go through like Councillor Feeney saying we're going to appoint staff people as signing authorities as if that's not already written down somewhere. This has been the town's practice. We acknowledge this should be done by policy so that we're not actually making this motion over and over again. And we will be coming forward with something to amend one of our policies as appropriate when the time comes. So apologies that we're doing it this way, but it hopefully will be the last time we have a new council come in and have to actually go through
Excellent.
to reappoint our signing authorities in this manner. It should be automatic.
Yep. Okay. On the motion, all in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to 7.3, cash gifts from members of council. Councillor Carver, before you begin your discussion of that, I must note that this particular item has been before council last year and the year before. And I would have to ask whether there is significant new information so as to make this consideration necessary.
Well, I believe that it's permissible to bring a motion to a new council that has not heard the motion before.
Not according to our meeting procedures. CAO?
The meeting procedure would be that prior to considering the motion, the council members would have to be asked by the chair to vote on whether the motion would be reconsidered. And so there's an opportunity for the would-be mover to make the case as to why, and I think that's what's happening now.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
the chair could call on the committee or the council to ask, will you hear the motion? Before then there would be a request for a seconder and everything.
My next statement. Council will vote to reconsider a
But wait-
motion prior to the motion itself being put before council.
I would like to propose that there is new information in this motion. And the new information is that having learned that the cash gifts that have been traditionally made to council are recorded in the town budget under council expenses. And as far as I know, it's not listed as a gift. I
would personally describe that as a relatively minor accounting issue that the finance manager could correct with the stroke of a pen. However, in the interest of the issue at hand, we will go to council and ask the council whether or not you want to reconsider the motion as it stands. If you want to reconsider, then we vote on the motion anew. If you don't wish to reconsider, then you've got that option.
So,
Mayor,
Mr. Mayor, you
I'm
might want to
I'm-
just ask for any questions before you ask for yay or nay on reconsider, just to be sure everyone knows that they're.
Are there
I
any
believe-
questions? Councillor Carver?
Oh, I think I believe that motion would be not debatable. Is that correct?
It's
Yeah,
not
there usually
debatable,
isn't,
but
there
I
wouldn't
think
be
in the
debate once the
interest of,
question is called.
you know, the openness of council, if someone has a question on this piece, not the next piece, but this piece. Deputy Mayor?
I would be fine to reconsider.
Okay. So we've got one, this is to reconsider the vote.
I'm prepared to
1,
reconsider the
2,
vote,
3,
Mayor.
4, 5, okay, 6. We have sufficient votes. So now we're down to Councillor Carver's motion that, Councillor, would you like to enlighten us?
Yes, thank you. Whereas the town of Mahone Bay has made a practice of giving gifts of cash to members of council at Christmas. And whereas these cash gifts are recorded in the town budget under council expenses and are thereby not transparent to the public. And whereas the town strives to achieve transparency in all its endeavors. And whereas members of council have a different relationship to the town than employees who traditionally receive a gift of cash in December. Therefore, be it resolved that the town discontinue the practice of giving cash gifts to members of council at Christmas or at any other time of year.
Okay. Questions on the motion? No questions? Okay, let's go to the vote. All in favor of ending the cash gifts for members of
Did we have a
council?
seconder on that, Mr. Mayor?
Oh,
Oh.
I thought we had one. I'm sorry. Councillor Feeney, are you seconding?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. All in favor of ending the cash gifts? 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion's carried. Okay, let's go to, we only have one report. Unless there's something significant in that report and in accordance with policy, I would suggest that we conclude our business and take any questions from the floor.
Unless anybody has a question about the report, about the Lunenburg County Senior Safety.
There may
Program?
be, yeah. Kelly Redden, are there any questions on the floor?
No questions.
Okay. No questions about the committee report?
Nope.
Okay. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to go in camera. So moved by the deputy mayor. Do we have a seconder? Okay, all in favor? Motion's carried.